Welcome back everyone to a new video, and this time we're dissecting some of the inconsistencies in the latest Saw X movie. While Saw X delivers its signature brand of gory thrills, the narrative stumbles upon some discrepancies that leave you scratching your head. In my previous review, I highlighted some of the inconsistencies within the film itself, but when I saw the earlier films again, I found even more contradictions that left even bigger plot holes within the entire story, or at least within the story of the first 3 Saw films. Here's why the story of Saw X makes some confusing choices. But before we get into it, I'll have to warn you all that there will be some major spoilers ahead.
Live or die, the choice is yours.
The film claims to take place after the first Saw, and Amanda Young is presented as compassionate and reformed, which is a stark contrast to her cruel and ruthless self back then. Remember, she's the one who sealed Adam's fate in the bathroom after the events of the first part, and later on devised inescapable death traps for other victims, which was revealed in the 3rd Saw installment. Saw X paints Amanda's recovery from trauma as Jigsaw's doing, but this contradicts her arc as the story supposedly continues, despite Jigsaw's game and Amanda saying,
helped me.
She never truly escapes her inner demons. In fact, she becomes increasingly unhinged and vengeful, culminating in her own demise. So her sudden change in Saw X seems rather nonsensical, having her undergo a complete personality shift off-screen without addressing her violent past and future feels illogical and paradoxical, because she supposedly turns again in the 3rd part into a psychopathic serial killer. In the earlier Saw films, we understand John Kramer's initial motivation, which was the tragic loss of his unborn child. He designed his first trap for the man responsible, Cecil, which was a relatively simple contraption, fueled by raw rage. However, Saw X throws this progression out the window. Suddenly, John is crafting elaborate, intricate traps within a short time frame, despite his illness and limited resources. This also contradicts his established pattern of starting simple and evolving based on time and experience. Even if we ignore the character inconsistencies, the film's timeline poses serious challenges. It claims John designs these complex traps while desperately seeking a cure in Mexico. Considering his ailing health and the short time period of his stay there, crafting such elaborate contraptions seems physically impossible. Now, we all know Jigsaw has a complex attitude towards crime and punishment, and his ethical ideology has always been on the darker side. However, in Saw X, we see him showing immense compassion and kindness towards young Carlos, protesting strongly when he is unwillingly put into a trap. Yet, as Saw X takes place between the first and second film, it's odd to see him have this much care for children after traumatizing Dr. Gordon's young daughter, Diana, before going on to throw Danny Matthews into a trap and eventually in the safe place in Saw 2, and later on kidnapping Lynn and Jeff's daughter in Saw 3. When we meet John in Saw X, his work is supposed to have barely begun, and his identity as Jigsaw doesn't contain the same widespread acknowledgement as it does in later films, since this story in Saw X is coming right after the first part, when neither Adam nor Dr. Gordon recognize Jigsaw or his work. It's odd then that in this film, Jigsaw is quite famous, when Cecilia mocks John in the film, calling him out as Jigsaw.
When I realized who you really were, Jig-fucking-Saw. And now, the great John Kramer is gonna die in one of his own traps.
It seems strange that she would have so much information on his work, considering that he would have just started small and simple, and had barely gotten any notoriety in America, never mind in Mexico. In Saw 6, we learn that John, desperate for treatment for his brain tumor, approaches William Easton for insurance coverage, only to be denied. This fuels his rage and sets him on the path of his twisted games. However, Saw X throws this established backstory into disarray as well. John suddenly has access to a staggering amount of wealth. He not only funds a $250,000 experimental treatment, a huge contrast to his earlier desperation, but also lavishly spends on elaborate traps, warehouses, and equipment. This sudden financial windfall makes no sense within the established narrative, because it poses several questions. Where did this money come from? Was it simply forgotten about in previous films, or is this a convenient plot device pulled out of thin air? And if he's so desperate for treatment, why does he give away such a significant portion of his newfound wealth to young Carlos? This selfless act while potentially meant to showcase his compassion, undermines his core character as someone driven by vengeance and a twisted sense of justice. It creates a confusing and illogical portrayal of his motivations. Now I know from all of these points I raised here, I may have sounded like I hated every part of this movie, but I didn't. I enjoyed certain aspects of it, mainly the creativity of the traps, the performances of Tobin and Shawnee, as well as the intense levels of gore that were well preserved as the signature of this movie. But all of these inconsistencies I mentioned created a narrative dissonance, which left me questioning the logic of John's actions and the wider Saw universe. While Saw X offers its fair share of chills and gore, a cohesive and believable story ultimately forms the foundation of a truly satisfying horror experience. In this case, however, the foundation seems very shaky, leaving the thrills hanging precariously. In the end, let me know, what did y'all think about the points that I raised here? Do you agree or disagree with some or all of them? And do you think that Saw X fits nicely within the story of the first 3 parts? Or do you think that it creates more plot holes within the whole narrative? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and I would very much like to read what you have to say about it. And until I see you all in the next video, thank you very much for watching, have a splendid day, and peace out.